from bronze to mythic. If I could only open some rares.
That's freaking terrible.
But we'll work hard to solve the format.
7 wins.
And I'm sure we'll make it there.
All right, what's up, my friends? Welcome to Bronze to Mythic, episode 25. This is the series retrospective. We did it! Like, comment, subscribe, hit all the buttons, hit the bell, do all the usual stuff here. And we have made Mythic. It took us 24 drafts. And this is the episode that ends the series. So this is the episode where I go back, I look at the entire series here on untapped.gg. You can download it for yourself using the link in the chat or in the description, free to use. You can track all your games just like this, exactly like this. And please use my link as a download because they sponsor me and they'll know that I sent you there. And we're going to go over the entire series. So if you have not watched the series yet, or you want to not be spoiler, hashtag spoilers, I'm about to go over the entire series here and spoil everything. So this is for folks who watched the whole series and want to kind of go over the format and kind of get our big picture look at how things went. So we can see here, it took us 24 drafts, which are all right here. We had a total win rate of 65%, which is fine. I feel like I can do better than that, but which is pretty good though, honestly. You know, it's a 2 to 1 ratio. We had 6-7 win runs in 24 drafts, which is also like fine. Our highest rank was Mythic 347, and it took us about 29 hours of gameplay, longer than usual. So usually, we have our line set at 21.5 drafts for Mythic. I would say usually it's about 24 hours of gameplay. A slower format, a lot of grindy games, and of course a few more drafts than I would have liked. But there it is. Our color preferences, we were most often all 5 colors, and that was also a pretty winning deck for us at 68%. We had not green, or was it what we were saying? Creamy Grixis was our name for it. At our second most played at 67% win rate. Black-white we played a number of times, only went 9-9 though, for our worst possible win rate. Demir's our highest win rate. I get Demir at 11-4. Then we were Boros for 71%. And then beyond this, we were mostly just one draft. We had 2 drafts of Sultai at 54%, 4-color, no red. Then we have some outlier series, one shots. So, 1 blue-white deck, 1 Jeskai deck, 1 green-white deck, etc., etc. So, interesting to see our most played and one of our best decks was 5 colors. The domain decks all felt a lot better than they look, which is very important. And we can see here not much green in the top except for the domain deck, which is interesting for sure. So, let's scroll all the way to the bottom and look at our decks going through first to last. So, our first deck was a Sultai deck. You can see it over here on the left. And it was a pretty sweet deck. It seemed honestly better than it ended up doing. Prodigy, good grind. The games felt pretty well. We kind of just lost some games. I don't remember everything what happened, but Father of Vigor, pretty sweet. Just a very basic looking Sultai deck. Boner Rattle's pretty great. Our second deck was probably one of my favorite decks of the format. Of course, LSV ranked the Llanowar Stalker as an actual 0, which I think is just stupid. It's not a great card. It's not a card you actively want in your deck. But it can be playable in the right circumstances, and these are the right circumstances. We were green-white, super low to the ground, 4-stalker, a bajillion 2-drops, take up the shield for tricks, Vanguard, stall for times, tap some blockers, some badgers. We saw here in this deck how the kickers can kind of splash. Or we have a random blue land or 2 because we were splashing out, and then any black lands? Any black lands here? No black lands, but random blue lands for stall for time, which is kind of cool. Heroic Charge, pretty cool. Phalanx is pretty cool. So, kind of a cool deck. Probably a pretty hard deck to draft, honestly, because it's hard to get all the pieces for it. And, it's a little risky and so on and so forth, but pretty fun one. Next draft was a Jeskai deck. Little Balmor. It was our only Balmor deck. And this deck was just fine. We had 2 Battling Mystic. It was pretty cool. Sky Knight, Tolarian Terror. Hadn't really realized how good Terror was yet. Grixis was next, and we have a little bit of wall stuff happening here. This deck was kind of just whatever. We see a lot of competing things here. We have a few walls, some scavengers, a little sacrifice stuff. Kind of just a mess, honestly. A couple rares, but not enough to pull through. Just a 3/3. Trophy with a red-green deck, which is pretty awesome. This was a Golden Argosy, kind of just red-green aggro deck. This didn't really happen much later on in the period. I think we were 5 colors a lot, but kind of a cool deck. Didn't actually seem that good, but got there. Both Rada and the Tsar are kind of just okay cards, but next was a Bant deck, and very tokeny, a lot of white stuff. This one only did okay. I don't know. Geysers are pretty cool. It was all right. Black white was not very good for us. We were black white twice. I've heard good things about black white, but we were black white twice. We were barely at 500. It just, I don't know. It didn't really work that well for us. Just like the cards weren't great. The arena wasn't particularly awesome. I think Aaron's pretty overrated. I think that one of the lessons we learned in this format was that there's a lot of double color uncommon legends. They're not draws. They're not cards that make you want to go into a color pair. They're cards you can play if you already are the color pair, because the double colors it makes them very hard to cast. They don't play nearly as well as they look. They're awkward. Obviously this card is good in this deck. We have Captain's Call, Warhorse, etc. But just kind of awkward. I think another thing we also learned was that you often don't want to have more than one of the common affinity cards in your deck. Each color has one of these. It's a common that it has affinity for a certain thing. That thing is very thematic, and if your deck is going to be doing what you want to be doing, then the theme will work. But if you shouldn't have two of them because they're just different themes. So Writhe the Necromancer wants you to play a bunch of creatures and graveyard stuff and play a long grindy game, whereas the Phalanx wants you to play tokens and kind of go wide and things like that. They don't jive very well. I think it's a serious count against your deck if your deck has multiples of these from different colors in it. That's a warning sign. That's how I watch out for. Domain deck was next, and I think this was our first trip along the domain lane. It was kind of going crazy. That was pretty cool. We had Herd Migration, some big boomers here. Only pulled off a 5-3. I think this was the point where we were like, oh, we can kind of do some crazy stuff here and go nuts with all of our colors. We got blue cards in here. We got all the colors, white cards. That was our first step into a larger world, if you will. We got another... We got Creamy Grixis here. I think it was our first Creamy Grixis deck. And deck was solid. We got 6 wins. Decent rare. This deck kind of looked like a mess. But I think we learned in this format is that like the decks that are messy end up doing well as long as your power level is good and your mana is good. Mardu, more so Rakdos, splashing white. This deck was a little weird, kind of an aggro deck. Aggro is hard to make work in this format. We had a lot of 2-drops, and some removal spells, stuff like that. But it just kind of gets outclassed. I was surprised this deck didn't do that well, but you can see here pretty good curves, some rares, but I just didn't really get there, unfortunately. Black white again. Would not recommend black white, at least from my point of view. I've heard good things about it, but deck looked fine. We had Liliana the Veil and some stuff, but it just didn't really perform that well. We had a non-black kind of domainy deck. This is actually more of like a blue-red deck. It was splashing green for Rith. This deck was fine. It was all right. A little blue-reddy stuff going on. There's definitely some dyssynergy between the domain stuff and the blue-red stuff, but I don't know, it was all right. Went 5-3 with a blue-white deck. I was very surprised this deck did poorly. This was a blue-white deck. We had Super Clean Curve. We had Haughty Jin, Triple Frostfist Strider, Defiler of Dreams, Raph Brannigan. Decks seemed great. I think we've actually had a few Triple Frostfist Strider decks in this format, and they didn't always perform super well because they were a little bit clunky. I think there's definitely an element of you can have too many big things in this format because there are plenty of big things to do. So you can value them a little bit lower because you always find some big thing to do. Whereas the early cards, the removal spells, and the setup cards are a little more important. So only 5-3 here is a little weird. We had a train wreck disaster with this wall deck. We were like a Dimir deck, and we opened up Wingmantle Chaplain and tried to go walls, and it just didn't really work. Chaplain is really, really good, but it can be kind of trappy at times, where I feel like if you try and do it and it just doesn't really work out, your deck's kind of slow and clunky, and it just doesn't really happen. Super busted card for sure, but I think it requires a little more work than it feels like it does sometimes. 7-1 here with Boros Aggro. This deck was awesome. We had Squee, good removal spells, Defiler of Faith, great curve, a couple tricks. Then you take out the shield, one of the best tricks you can have. This card's super, super awesome. Just super solid deck here. We had another sort of kind of like 4-color domainy deck, more of like a green-black deck though, where we had a lot of good recursion stuff. Cult Conscript was really good. Repossession was awesome. Vivisector, Vine Wall, Soul Tender for graveyard stuff, and this was also a Necromass deck. So you can see here double Necromass. Splashing for Micromancer, which is a super good card in these decks. It can go get the Cult Conscript. I'm sorry, the Repo or Tail Swipe. So this is a really good Micromancer. This deck was really good. That was very, very good. Territory Amaro, Leyline Binding, and Necromass. Pretty cool deck. We had a Dimir deck we went 7-1 with, and Dimir is one of the better things it feels like in this format. Just a lot of really good grindy cards. Tolarian, Geyser, and Tribute to Urborg, a card that was undervalued a lot. Really good removal spell. Vortex is obviously awesome, and a card that goes kind of late. Extinguish, same thing, goes kind of late because it is double black. We had a Drag, Connoisseur, Cruelty, just really, really rock solid deck here. Funny, Braids wasn't very good in this deck, but it was still just a 3-3. But our next deck was also a Braids deck, and I think you can build a cool Braids deck in this format, but it's kind of hard to do. But this deck was fine. It just didn't really work though. We went 1-3. This is a very surprising one of the surprising drafts. We had a lot of deck drafts in this format where we just like our deck looked good and we just kind of didn't get there. And this was one of them. This deck looked really good to me. Double Tribute, double Repo, good curve, Phyrexian Rangers, Tatiova, Micromancer, removal spells, top end. Like, I don't know what more you want than this deck. I think the rank, the 1-3 was probably a little bit of an aberration. I mean, I played bad or had a bad matchup or got mana screwed, but was very surprised that they went 1-3. Next up was Boros again for a 3-3. Not as good as the last one. No rares this time around, really. We had Jaya, but this is a weird deck because it wasn't really following the rules of the of Boros. Boros is usually a go wide deck, a lot of token makers, a lot of where is it? The Pumpy thing, whatever. The Pump Your Team +2/+1. This deck was almost like Boros mid-range. We had a few rares and some bigger idiots. We had Temporal Firestorm for a Wrath. We had Jaya, 4/4, Hurler Cyclops. Kind of a weird deck where we were in the sort of right colors, but didn't really have the right theme cards. And that's an important thing to note is that the variance in how good each card is varies widely in this set. Where sometimes you'll want to take a Cavalier over a Citizen's Arrest because you just need the creatures in your go wide deck, or vice versa. So I think it's very, very important. There aren't really any knockdown top commons in this set. There aren't any inspiring overseers. You want to be taking the cards that are good in your particular deck, which is important. Black white again. Again, just a 4/3 black white. Kind of under performed for us. We had Shieldred. The Argosy was pretty good in this deck. We had the reinforcements and Phyrexian Rangers, but this one just didn't really work that well. I don't know. This deck seemed good to me too, but just didn't really pan out that well, as black white was often wont to do. This was my most confused deck of the format, where this deck looked phenomenal to me. A blue-black deck, great control elements, Tribute to Urborg, Essence Scatter, Espionage, removal spells, Tolarian Geyser, Extinguish the Light, Frost Fiststrider, Tolarian Terror. But we only went 4/3. I think part of that was we were a little too heavy in the top end. Again, I think you want to have a number of cheap spells. You can definitely play too many big idiots in this format because there are a lot of them, and stumble early. I think that was like the fall of this deck, if you will. So we were just a little too stumbly. Deck did seem really, really good. But kind of a no rare, just like good solid deck. And then we went from that to this. This is where we kind of really, really leaned into just doing 5-color bullshit. Tried to stay open, got 4 Malaria's Outriders, got a late Netimo, we were able to splash, Drag the Bottom was phenomenal in this deck. Just a really, really, crazy 5-color, kind of like base, like black-white, I guess. I don't even know. We're just off the map here. And I thought I was tilt drafting after the prior drafts. We went 7-2 pretty easily, which is exciting. So got a lot of duels, got it all done, kind of base black-white domain, which is not what you think would happen, but it can definitely work in this format, which is cool. So up next was a kind of a base blue-white kind of Dimir deck. We got 7 wins with that one today. We had Solkanar, which is very important. This deck was pretty good as far as the good spells go. The white cards were a little weird because we had some go-wide cards in our deck that were just kind of like awkward. I will say I was somewhat impressed with Karn Silix, which I think is I thought was just going to be stone terrible. Ended up being okay because we were able to use cards like Stall for Time and Captain's Call and just kind of like make our opponents stall out the early game with the Silix in place. They couldn't really play anything else into the Silix, but they also couldn't really attack either. Then we were able to pop the Silix on turn like 6 or 7 with an Essence Scatter up, which was awesome. Missionary is great. And of course, Solganar was huge here too. This is the kind of deck where you really want to have a rare. Having a rare to draw to in a super long game is really very important, so that helped out a lot. And then our last deck was 5 colors again. Which is good. Outriders, Sentries. I think that we were a little lacking in interaction-ish, and our colors were a little awkward in this deck. Destroy Evil is a great card, but we needed a little more early removal in this deck. We stumbled a little bit, lost some aggro decks. We got Mana Screw once, twice also, but definitely, a clear telling fact that we ended our series with a 5-color deck, because that's, I think, one of the best things you can do in this format. So, and that was it. So 24 drafts, and Bronze and Mythic, of course. For all my folks on YouTube and on my stream, we have our channel for Bronze and Mythic as well. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe on that one, please, right there. And now that we're in the off season for Bronze and Mythic, we're going to be still have an episode Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to do Draftsmith Takes the Wheel, where I let the Draftsmith algorithm, the one that we kind of keep an eye on, but it's more of like a guidelines thing. We're going to do a draft where we follow the pick blindly every time with Draftsmith. It's going to be hilarious in this format because it's such a weird open-ended format. It's very, very difficult for even a very good human player. For an algorithm, it's going to be very, very interesting, but that's going to be fun, so we'll do that. We'll do some Mythic drafts as well, and I might do a little bit of Constructed on the channel as far as pointing out decks that are really good to rank up with specifically. So that's this episode 25 in the books. The series is complete. We did it. Bronze and Mythic Dominaria United is in the books. Again, more drafts coming up as well, though. Make sure you follow on, and I appreciate y'all hanging out. Let me know what you thought about the format. What were your big questions? What were your big epiphanies? And I'll see you fine, folks. Thanks, folks. Have a good one. Appreciate it.